The chamber held 2,000 seats, and maybe 40 opinions worth having. Junho sat in the third row of the Earth delegation block, 4 chairs pushed together at the far left corner of the floor. The kind of placement you gave someone you had already decided not to listen to. The session had been running 9 hours. The air recyclers made a low hum that Junho had memorized somewhere around hour 3. He knew its rhythm now, the way you know a song you never chose to learn. The vote counter on the wall read 14-3. The presiding voice, a tall, pale-skinned Varric, named something Junho had never bothered to pronounce correctly, was still reading from the resolution document, Clause 19 of 47. The language was careful and very long, in the way that language gets when people want to sound reasonable while doing something that isn't. Clause 19 banned Earth vessels from all recognized trade corridors. 21 through 30 covered resource agreements, joint research programs, emergency relief access. Junho checked his watch. He had a flight home in 6 hours. Bomi, his aide, sat beside him with a stylus frozen above her notepad. She had stopped writing after Clause 8. She was 24 years old and had worked very hard to earn a seat in this room, and was now discovering, at speed, what the room actually was. The presiding voice paused at Clause 31 and reached for water. Junho looked at the ceiling. The chamber was designed to make you feel small. High arches, walls that shifted color with the collective emotional register of the species present. Right now, they glowed a soft amber, warm, satisfied. The majority had what they wanted, and the light agreed with them. He thought about the flight home. He always took the window seat. Clause 37 removed Earth from emergency beacon networks. 38 cut off stellar cartography updates. 39 dealt with trade tariffs that no longer applied to anyone, since there would no longer be any trade. He read along from his copy for a while, and then stopped, because it stopped being interesting. Bomi leaned over. Her voice was barely a sound. "Sir, should I be writing this down?" "No," Junho said. "Should I be doing something, anything?" "No." She sat back, stared at her blank notepad. The stylus stayed frozen. The resolution reached its last clause at hour 9 and 40 minutes. The presiding voice set the document flat, looked out at the floor, looked specifically at the 4-chair block, and asked if the Earth delegation wished to make a final statement for the official record. Junho stood. 2,000 sets of eyes moved to him. The ceiling panels flickered gold. The room pulled in a breath and held it, waiting for something, for a rebuttal, an appeal, the kind of public pain that made votes like this feel justified. He straightened his jacket, both buttons. He said, "No." He sat down. The chamber did not know how to process that. There was a silence that went on too long, the kind that forms when a room builds itself around an expectation, and the expected thing doesn't arrive. The presiding voice blinked twice, looked at the document, looked back at Junho. Junho was looking at his watch. The procedural wrap-up began. The formal recording of the vote, the timeline, the 30-day order requiring all Earth vessels to clear Council-recognized space. Standard language, the kind that existed to make large, cold decisions sound like administration. Junho stood before it finished. He did not push back his chair, or make noise, or give the room anything to remember. He picked up the folder he had brought. Empty. Always empty. He had carried an empty folder into this chamber for 3 years, as a private joke he had never explained to anyone. And he walked toward the back exit. A steady walk, not fast, not slow. A man who remembered he left the kettle on. Bomi scrambled after him. The heavy doors closed behind them with a sound like a held breath let go. The corridor outside was white and long, and smelled like recycled air, and whatever cleaning compound the Varek favored, which was sharp enough to notice. Bomi's footsteps were quick beside his. Junho walked the way he always walked. "Sir," she said. What do we do now? Go home, he said. She was quiet for a few steps. Then, and after that? The corridors stretched ahead of them, emptying out as other delegations trickled away to celebrate or plan or do whatever the winning side does after a vote built to break someone. Something interesting, Junho said. Probably. Bomi opened her mouth, thought about it, closed it, kept walking. They reached the transport bay. Junho handed in his visitor badge at the desk, a small flat chip that had granted him access to 43 square centimeters of floor space in a room that made decisions for 300 inhabited worlds. He set it on the counter without looking at the attendant, walked through the gate without breaking stride. In the observation gallery above the chamber floor, a figure stood at the glass and watched them go. Kibum had run the Earth liaison desk for 6 years. He knew Junho's walk, that particular set of the shoulders, the way the man moved like he was saving something up. Kibum had filed over 1,000 reports on Earth's delegation activities. He knew the coffee order of every person in the 4-chair block. He knew Bomi's full academic record, the name of her dog, the brand of her running shoes. He watched Junho turn the corner at the end of the corridor and disappear. He did not open his report file that evening. He sat in his office in the dark, with his hands flat on the desk, and did not write a single word, and did not move for a very long time. The transmission reached Earth 14 hours later. Someone in the Council's technical division had already quietly downgraded Earth's direct communication access, which meant the signal rerouted through 3 secondary relay points and arrived slightly degraded, which seemed about right. Nara received it at her desk at 6 in the morning. She was on her second coffee, which meant she had been awake since 4, which was not unusual. The window behind her showed a sky still deciding whether to be night or day. Out across the city, visible on the horizon, the shipyard lights were already burning. They burned every morning, all morning, and she had stopped consciously noticing them the way you stop noticing a clock. She read the transmission once, all 47 clauses, full text. She set it face down on her desk. She opened her planner, the paper one that her entire staff made fun of, the one with the brown cover and the coffee ring on the back. She wrote one line on the next clean page. Day 1. She closed it, picked up her coffee, looked at the shipyard lights getting brighter as the sky caught up to them. She did not call an emergency meeting, did not draft a public statement, did not begin the grief and scramble that the Council had designed its 30-day deadline around, the controlled collapse they had voted to watch from a comfortable distance. She drank her coffee. The sky finished deciding. The yards kept burning. There was work to do, and she knew exactly where it started. The Council leaked the resolution early. They did this because they had done it before, with smaller species, younger members, frightened ones. A leak was a tool. It gave the target time to panic publicly before the deadline arrived, which softened them, which made the resulting diplomacy easier to manage. It was a clean and practiced thing, and it had always worked. The leak went out on a Tuesday. On Wednesday morning, Secretary General Unji delivered a 12-minute address from the Geneva Assembly floor, broadcast on every channel available to Council-connected receivers across 40 light-years of recognized space. She was 71 years old and wore no jewelry and spoke in the flat, unhurried voice of someone who had been having important conversations since before most of the Council's current members were born. She thanked the Galactic Council for their time together. She wished them well in their future efforts. She announced that Earth was formally withdrawing its Associate Observer application, effective immediately, backdated 61 years to the original submission date, meaning Earth had never formally been part of the Council process at all, meaning every joint resolution that referenced Earth's observer status now had a paperwork problem, meaning the Council's legal division would spend the next 3 months in a very bad room trying to figure out what that meant. She did not smile when she said it. She did not need to. She turned off the feed and went to get lunch. The room where Johann presented Project Threshold was not a grand room. It was a conference room on the 4th floor of the Earth Fleet Infrastructure Directorate, with a broken ceiling tile and a coffee machine that made a sound like a small animal in distress. 12 department heads sat around the table in various states of exhaustion. 2 of them had been awake for 22 hours. 1 had fallen asleep briefly and was hoping no one had noticed. Johann stood at the board and talked for 40 minutes. Project Threshold had been running in classified development for 11 years. It was a self-contained interstellar infrastructure network, trade routes, relay stations, jump corridors, comm relays. All of it designed from the ground up to operate with zero dependency on council-controlled space. The resource requirements were the kind of numbers that made budget people go very still and quiet. Johann had the manner of someone describing a drainage issue in a building he was fond of. He pointed at diagrams. He explained load tolerances. He used the phrase, "not ideal but manageable," 7 times. When he finished, the room was quiet. Someone asked how long construction would take. Johann looked at the ceiling for a moment, doing something in his head. 12 years if everything goes badly, he said. 8 if we're mediocre. 5 if we're us. Nobody laughed, but 2 people straightened up in their chairs. One of the department heads, a woman named Hyrie, who ran logistics and had a reputation for destroying optimistic timelines, asked who had authorized 11 years of classified infrastructure development without a full assembly review. There was a short silence. Then Nara, who was sitting at the far end of the table with her paper planner open, said, "I did." Hyrie looked at her. "Under what directive?" Nara turned a page. "Build as if no one is coming to help." She looked up. Because no one was. Nobody asked a follow-up question after that. Kibum arrived on Earth 9 days after the vote. He came on a civilian shuttle, booked under a name that wasn't his, carrying 2 bags and a data chip in his shirt pocket. He had told his supervisors on the council side that he needed a personal leave. Family matter. Vague and uncomfortable in the way that made people stop asking. They had let him go without much thought. He had been the Earth desk liaison for 6 years, which meant in council terms he was slightly tainted by association, which meant no one was sorry to have him out of the office for a while. Junho met him at the dock. No ceremony, no official welcome. Just Junho in a gray coat, standing near the exit gates, with his hands in his pockets, looking like a man waiting for a delayed bus. Kibum walked up to him. He was moving carefully, favoring his left side. Junho noted this and said nothing about it. Kibum reached into his shirt pocket and held out the data chip. Everything he had never been supposed to show them. Council internal surveillance files. Closed deliberation records going back 9 years. Trade leverage maps showing which species were being quietly pressured and how. The actual reasons behind decisions that had been announced as procedural. Junho took it, slid it into his coat pocket without looking at it. Kibum said he would like a job. Junho started walking toward the exit. Kibum fell into step beside him, still favoring the left side. "You cook?" Junho said. Kibum blinked. "I what?" "Cook, food, can you do it?" "I mean, yes, reasonably." "Good," Junho said. "I live alone and I eat badly. We'll figure out the rest." Mireille got the news 2 weeks late. Out on the deep perimeter, communication lag was a fact of the job, rather than an inconvenience. Signals came when they came. Her ship, a mid-range patrol cutter she had named Garoon, which meant roughly the going, in an old dialect her grandmother used, moved through the outer edge of mapped space with the easy confidence of something that belonged there. She was running a standard corridor survey when the council transmission finally caught up with her. She read it once, cover to end, all 47 clauses. Read it again. She sat back in the pilot's seat with her hands in her lap and looked at the star field through the forward viewport for a while. Out here the stars were thick and close-looking, the way they never looked from a planet's surface. Her crew of 4 were asleep in rotation. The ship hummed. She thought about the chamber she had visited once, 3 years ago, on a protocol visit. The 4-chair block, the corner placement, the amber light that said you were never really here. She reached forward and pulled up the navigation system. She did not plot a course back toward Council space. She plotted a course further out. There was a region on the edge of her survey map that no one had formally filed a route through. Not Council, not Earth, not anyone. Nobody had told her she couldn't go look. On day 29 of the 30-day deadline, the last registered Earth vessel cleared the outer boundary of Council-recognized space. It was a cargo hauler called Persistent Argument, which had always been Nara's favorite ship name in the registry. It crossed the line at 0340 station time, filed its departure confirmation, and kept moving. On day 30, at 0612 station time, Johann's first threshold relay node came online. It sat 3 light minutes outside the Council boundary. Clean signal, full operational capacity. It connected to nothing that the Council owned, and everything that Johann had spent 11 years building in the dark. Nara received the activation confirmation at her desk. Same desk, same window, same shipyard lights on the horizon. She read the single-line message. She picked up her pen, opened her planner to the page that said Day 1, and counted forward. She wrote, Day 30, Node 1 active. She closed the planner, drank her coffee. Outside the window, the yards were already building Node 2. 8 years is a long time when nobody is watching. The Council had expected a slow decline. Species without access to recognized trade corridors tended to contract, their economies pulling inward, their populations growing cautious, their ambitions narrowing to fit the smaller world they were permitted to occupy. The Council had seen it before. They knew the shape of it. They were not watching Earth because they were confident they already knew how the story ended. They were wrong about this, in a way that would take them several years to fully understand. In year 2, Mireille found the Dravathi. The Council's official records listed them as pre-civilizational, a young species on a resource-poor system at the edge of the outer survey range, not yet worth formal contact. Nobody had updated it, because nobody had gone back to check. Mireille found them because she was following a debris pattern that suggested repeated structural launches, not natural, not random. She brought Garin into low orbit over their 3rd planet, and spent 6 hours on long-range visual before opening a comm channel on the broadest possible frequency. The Dravathi answered in 11 minutes. They were not pre-civilizational. They were post-catastrophic, which is a different thing entirely. A species that had been through something large and hard, and had come out the other side quieter, and more careful than they had been before. Their cities were built low to the ground. Their communication was slow and deliberate. They weighed words the way people weigh things they have learned the cost of dropping. Mireille had no authorization to make first contact. There was no one to authorize with. She sat in her cockpit and thought about it for about 4 minutes, and then began the first formal conversation between humanity and the Dravathi, which she later described in her mission log as awkward at the start, better after the first hour, excellent by dinner. The trade compact they signed 6 weeks later covered rare mineral access, jump corridor mapping rights, and one specific fermented grain drink from the Dravathi lowlands that Mireille brought back to Earth in a sealed cargo container and presented to Nara with the gravity of someone handing over a peace treaty. Nara tasted it, set the cup down, looked at the ceiling. Worth it, she said. The whole thing. Worth it. In year 3, the Veth Compact sent a fleet. The Veth were not Council members, but they did enough business through Council corridors to share their interests. And their interests did not include a human relay infrastructure running through space they had quietly claimed on maps they had never formally filed. When a threshold construction team arrived to install a corridor node in the disputed zone, the Veth sent a diplomatic message. Then a second one. Then 12 warships. Mirai's corps had been in the region for 6 weeks before the Veth fleet arrived. She had 3 times their numbers, positioned well, and no orders that required her to move. She did not fire a single shot. She simply answered the Veth fleet's arrival signal with her ship count and her current fuel status, which meant she had enough to stay exactly where she was for a very long time. The Veth fleet held position for 18 hours. Then they requested new orders from their command. Then they left. Mirai filed an incident report. 2 sentences. Subject line, routine corridor survey, minor contact, no incidents to report. Nara had it framed and hung it in her office next to a photograph of the first relay node. In Year 4, Johann finished Phase 1 of Threshold ahead of schedule, which he acknowledged with the expression of a man who had wanted to finish it earlier. The network connected 14 independent systems. 3 new human colonies were online, small ones, working ones, the kind built for function rather than announcement. 2 non-council species had quietly submitted access requests, routed through unofficial channels because they could not be seen making official contact with an entity the council had formally excluded. Nara approved both requests on the same afternoon. She sent Junho a note about it. He replied with 1 line. Getting busy. Good. In Year 6, the Council's internal economics team produced a report that was not distributed widely. The report identified a pattern. Trade traffic through Council-controlled corridors had declined steadily over 4 years. Not sharply, not in any single dramatic drop, but consistently, the way a river declines when something upstream changes its course without announcing itself. The modeling team looked for the cause and found partial evidence of an alternative network, outer relay nodes they could detect, but whose core architecture remained invisible to their instruments. The presiding voice reviewed the report in a closed session. Used the phrase, cause for concern, 4 times, asked for a monitoring expansion. The monitoring expansion found nothing useful. The core of Threshold was dark, built to be dark, had always been built to be dark. Johann had designed it that way in Year 1, when he was 29 years old and running on bad coffee and a level of personal stubbornness that his colleagues had long since stopped arguing with. In Year 7, Kibum learned to make a braised short-rib dish that Junho ate in complete silence for 11 minutes. They were sitting in Junho's kitchen on Earth, the small one with the window that faced the back garden, which had been in poor condition when Kibum arrived 2 years prior, and was now unreasonably well maintained, because Kibum had discovered he had opinions about gardens, the way some people discover they have opinions about architecture. Gradually, and then completely. Kibum set down his chopsticks, asked if Junho had seen the council's latest communique. Junho finished his last bite, set his own chopsticks down, skimmed it. They want to open a dialogue. Junho picked up his glass, drank, set it down, looked at the garden for a moment, where the late evening light was doing something soft and unhurried to the raised beds Kibum had built out of salvaged timber. Tell them we're busy, he said. Kibum looked at him. That's your full reply. Is it inaccurate? Kibum thought about it, reached for the serving dish to give Junho more ribs. No, he said, it's not. In Year 8, Nara stood before the Earth Assembly with no prepared speech. She had considered writing one and decided against it. Some things communicated better without words around them. She put one chart on the display screen. Earth's independent trade volume, plotted across 8 years, 1 data point per quarter. The line went up. It went up at the start, and it kept going up. And it had not stopped going up. There was no dip, no plateau, no year where things had contracted the way the Council's models had predicted they would. She left the chart on the screen for 30 seconds. Then, she turned it off, closed her folder, looked at the room. "We have a lot of work to do," she said. She was not wrong. The network was half built. 3 new access requests were sitting on her desk. Mireille had sent a survey report from a system so far out that the light from it was 60 years old when it reached Earth. Johann had already submitted Phase 2 planning documents, which were thorough and optimistic, and made her nervous in the good way, the way where the nervousness is really just excitement, wearing a responsible coat. She walked off the platform. There was work to do, and the years had shown, clearly and without arguments, that they were exactly the right people to do it. In the outer dark, Garen moved through unmapped space with its running lights steady, and its crew in good health, and Mireille's hand easy on the controls, and nobody in the galaxy had told her to stop. The Solvari came with 11 warships and a legal document. The document was thorough. 82 pages of jurisdictional language that reclassified a section of outer corridor space as Council-recognized territory, effective retroactively, specifically covering the zone where Threshold's Node 7 sat operational and humming. The legal team had worked on it for 4 months. It had no actual enforcement mechanism, but it had the right stamps and the right language, and it was meant to be the kind of thing that made smaller problems go away quietly. Node 7 was not a smaller problem. Mireille's corps had been stationed in the region for 3 weeks, because Johann had flagged the zone as one worth watching after a Council survey ship passed through it twice in the same month. Mireille had 12 vessels, positioned, patient, fueled for a long stay. The Solvari fleet arrived and began their count. What they were not counting on were the Dravathi ships, 4 of them, heavy-set and quiet, sitting on the far side of the node. Or the 2 Veth vessels, yes, the same Veth who had sent a fleet 4 years earlier and returned home without a word fired. Or the 3 ships from a species so new to the network that Nara had only signed their access agreement 6 weeks prior, and had not yet learned to pronounce their full species name without checking her notes. Nobody had called a meeting about this. Nobody had issued a joint defense order. They were simply there, the way neighbors show up when something threatens a street they all live on. The Solvari fleet counted every ship on the other side of the node. Then, they requested new orders from the Council, which took 8 hours to arrive. And when the orders arrived, they said to hold position and do nothing provocative. The Solvari held position for 2 days. Then, they left. Junho received the Council's invitation on a Thursday morning. He was in Nara's office, eating a rice ball she had not offered him, but had not stopped him from taking, reading through a supply chain summary that Harry had sent over. The invitation was formal, multiple drafts visible and a careful neutrality of the language, the kind of letter that had been written and rewritten until all the edges were smooth. They were inviting him to the chamber, not as an ambassador. Earth had no official diplomatic status with the Council anymore, by mutual if asymmetrical agreement. As a guest, a valued outside perspective, the letter said, which was the diplomatic way of saying, we would like to talk about the thing we cannot stop thinking about. He showed the letter to Nara. She read it, handed it back, went back to her coffee. Going, she said. Probably, he said. Someone should go look them in the eye. She turned a page in her planner. Take Bomi. He considered this. Bomi runs 3 departments now. She'll fit it in, Nara said. She always fits things in. The chamber looked exactly the same. Same high arches, same bioluminescent panels, same careful design meant to make visitors feel appropriately small. Junho sat in a chair that was not in the Earth delegation block. The Earth delegation block had been removed after the banishment and replaced with a small decorative installation about Council unity. And listened to the presiding voice deliver a 19-minute presentation. The offer was full membership, voting rights, a permanent seat, with the same standing as any founding species. The things that had been withheld for 61 years, now arranged on the table like they had always been available. Like the withholding had been a misunderstanding rather than a policy. Junho listened to all 19 minutes without expression. When it finished, he asked one question. "What do you need from us?" The presiding voice was prepared for this, spoke about stability, about the independent corridor network drawing traffic out of council space, about non-aligned species shifting their trade relationships in ways that created economic disruption, about the value of integration, of working within shared frameworks, of the collective benefit of. Junho nodded through this. When it finished, he said he would bring the offer back to the assembly. He did not say yes. He did not say no. He stood, shook hands with every delegate in reach. There were 12, and he shook all 12 hands, and left the chamber. A steady walk, the same walk, a man with somewhere to be. Bomi, who had attended the meeting and taken actual notes in an actual notepad, caught up with him in the corridor. "What are we going to tell them?" she said. "The truth," Junho said. "Which part of it?" "The part where their offer only works for them." Nara called Johann in that same evening. He arrived with a rolled tube of diagrams under his arm, and a thermal mug he had clearly been carrying for too many hours. She pointed at the chair across from her desk. She explained the council's offer, the full membership terms, the access it would grant, the political weight it would carry. She asked what it would mean for threshold. Johann unrolled one of the diagrams. Council regulatory framework, mapped against the current Phase 2 corridor layout. He had already run this. Of course he had already run this. He traced 3 lines with one finger. These corridors would need rerouting. Tapped 2 junction nodes. These would need a full external audit, which takes their process, not ours, 14 months minimum. He rolled the diagram back up. Phase 2 adds 3 years, maybe 4. She looked at the diagram tube sitting on her desk, picked up her coffee, drank it, set it down. "Right," she said. The council's next move was a resolution declaring Threshold's operational legitimacy void under interstellar infrastructure law, a legal instrument that had no enforcement mechanism but was designed to send a clear message to the non-aligned species currently using the network. The council does not recognize this, and you are taking a risk by relying on it. The message was sent on a Monday. By Friday, 7 new species had formally submitted network access requests. All 7 requests cited the same reason. Not Earth's military presence, not economic incentives, not political pressure in any direction. They had written their requests independently, in different languages, through different channels, and all 7 of them, in their own words, said the same thing. The network worked. It was reliable. It did not change their access terms for political reasons. It did not reroute their shipping lanes when they voted the wrong way in a council session they were not even permitted to vote in. It did not have tiers. It did not have associates. It just worked. Nara read all 7 requests in one sitting, approved all 7, filed the responses, opened her planner, wrote the date and the number 7, closed it. The council formally charged Kibum with treason that same week. The document arrived at his physical address on Earth, his real address, which they had found without difficulty, which meant they had always known where he was. The charges were detailed and carefully sourced. Unauthorized disclosure of classified materials, breach of liaison protocol, conspiracy with a non-member entity. The language was precise and serious, and built for a courtroom. It had nowhere to go. Earth's legal system did not recognize the Council's jurisdiction. The Council had no enforcement presence in Earth-controlled space. The document was, at its core, a letter. Kibum read it at the kitchen table. His left side still ached in cold weather. a permanent reminder of the things that had happened between the vote and his shuttle booking, the things he had never filed a report about and never would. He read the charges once. Then he laughed. Not a short laugh, a real one, long enough that Junho appeared in the doorway from the garden with dirt on his hands and one raised eyebrow. Ki-Bum held up the document. Junho read the subject line. His expression did not change. "Frame it," he said. Ki-Bum did. He hung it on the wall next to Nara's framed incident report, the two-sentence one that ended, "No incidents to report." They looked good together. Eunji delivered the Earth Assembly's formal reply to the Council's membership offer on a Wednesday. It was 2 pages. Page 1 was a counteroffer. Earth would cooperate on specific trade harmonization measures, case by case, as an independent entity. In exchange, formal Council recognition of Threshold as a sovereign operational network. No oversight, no audit rights, no regulatory integration, recognition only. A simple acknowledgement that it existed, and that the species using it were doing so legitimately. Page 2 was a reminder, quietly worded, 8 sentences. It noted for the record that Earth had never signed the original Council charter. Not as a full member, not as an associate observer. The application had been pending for 61 years and had now been formally withdrawn, which meant Earth had attended Council proceedings as a guest for 61 years. The reminder concluded by noting that guests were always free to leave when they chose to. It was a fact. It landed in the Council chamber like a stone dropped into still water. Not loud, but the rings went out in every direction and did not stop. The station had no name yet. That had been Johan's idea. He had argued in his quiet way that naming it implied it was finished, and nothing worth building was ever finished, and so they should wait and see what it became before they decided what to call it. Nara had disagreed with this logic, and then agreed with the outcome, which was the most common shape their conversations took. The station sat in a system that appeared on no Council chart. It had been built in 14 months by a construction team of 200 people who had treated the schedule the way they treated most schedules, as a suggestion made by someone who hadn't fully understood the situation. It was not grand. It had no high arches, no bioluminescent panels, no design choices aimed at making anyone feel small or significant in a particular direction. It had good lighting and reliable air, and a kitchen that Ki-Bum had personally reviewed the equipment list for, because if people were going to spend long hours in a place, the food needed to be right. The summit was Eunji's idea. She had pitched it to Junho over tea one evening as a thing that was simply time. Not a dramatic gesture, not a statement, just the next logical step for a network that had become, without anyone formally declaring it, the most reliable infrastructure in this region of the galaxy. "We're not founding anything," she had said. Junho had looked at his cup. "We're not founding anything," he had said. She had smiled at that, just slightly. "No," she said, "we're not. 14 species sent delegates. The Council sent observers. Not delegates, observers. 2 of them, seated in the gallery row that Johan had quietly made slightly less comfortable than the main floor, because he was an engineer, and he thought about these things. Junho noticed the observers when he came in. He was standing in the corridor outside the main hall, doing nothing in particular, when he saw them take their seats in the gallery. He stood there for a moment. A hallway. Quiet. No one watching. He smiled. Not a large smile. Not the kind that needed an audience. The kind that sits at the corner of the mouth and doesn't explain itself. 4 seconds. Then he straightened his jacket, both buttons, same as always, and went inside. He spoke for 11 minutes. No dramatic language, no references to the banishment, no accounting of the years, no itemized list of what had been built and how far it reached. He had written the speech 3 times and cut it down twice, and what remained was mostly the shape of a thing rather than the thing itself. He talked about what the network was, how it worked, what it asked of the species connected to it, which was almost nothing, only that they use it honestly and maintain their sections of it honestly and show up when something needed fixing. He talked about the structure of the proposed cooperative. No permanent presiding voice, no tiered membership, no associate observers sitting in corner chairs for 6 decades. Every species the same. Every chair the same chair. He talked about what it was not. It was not a government. It was not an army. It was not a replacement for anything that already worked. It was infrastructure, in the original sense of the word. The things underneath. The things that let other things happen. Poured himself water from the jug on the table, and drank it. The room was quiet for a moment. Then the Dravathi delegate, a senior figure whose name translated roughly as the one who came back after, which was what they called their eldest survivors, set both hands flat on the table. It was their formal gesture of yes, complete and without reservation. The delegate beside them did the same. Then the next. It went around the table, species by species, hands going flat on the surface one after another, and the sound of it was very quiet, just the soft contact of hands on a table in a station with no name yet, and it was one of the most complete sounds Junho had ever heard. Kibum watched from the gallery. He had come because Junho had asked him to, in the offhand way Junho asked for most things, which was to say he mentioned it once and then moved on as if it were obvious. Kibum had sat down next to the council observers without fully meaning to. They had glanced at him once. He was in earth dress, carrying nothing official. They looked away. He watched the hands go down on the table. One species, then another, then another. Species he recognized. Species he had written surveillance reports on. Species that the council had classified as dependent, as minor, as not worth the diplomatic investment of a full seat. All of them choosing the same table. He did not say anything. He sat with his hands in his lap and watched and felt the particular weight of a person who has lived on both sides of something and knows exactly which side cost more. It always ached in recycled air. He didn't move. Mireille was not there. She was 3 systems out, running a corridor check on a section of Phase 2 network that had been showing minor signal inconsistencies. Nothing critical. A calibration issue. The kind of thing that fixed itself half the time and needed a hands-on visit the other half. She had taken Garun out alone, just her and the small crew, the way she preferred. The confirmation signal came through at 14:20 ship time. 1 line. Summit concluded. 14 signatures. She read it in the cockpit. The same seat. The same forward viewport full of stars that were thick and close-looking and indifferent to everything. She sat for a moment. 8 years ago she had sat in this same seat with her hands in her lap after reading a 47-clause banishment order. She had felt the weight of it. Not devastation, not rage, but something quieter and more lasting. The feeling of a door being shut by someone who thought it would stay shut. She looked at the confirmation message. 14 signatures. 14 species at a table in a station with no name. She didn't make a log entry. She pulled up the navigation system. At the edge of her chart, past the last survey marker, past the last relay node, there was a system that appeared as a designation number and nothing else. No survey data, no recorded visits, just coordinates and the mathematical certainty that something was there. She set the course. Nobody told her to stop. Evening on Earth. Junho sat in Unji's office, the one with the large window that faced the shipyards, where 3 new relay tenders were being fitted under work lights that burned steady and bright against the dark. They drank tea, the instant kind in plain cups, the kind of tea that existed to be warm rather than to be good. Unji asked what he thought happened next. Junho held his cup, watched the shipyard lights, workers moving at the base of the tenders, small against the hull. He said the council would spend some time trying to process what the counteroffer meant for their legal framework. He said they would eventually ask to join the cooperative, quietly, with conditions, through back channels first. He said Unji would let them in, because she was practical, and because a cooperative that excluded the council out of principle was just doing the same thing the council had done, in the same direction. He said some species would resist and make noise and try to find the pressure points. He said they would find that the network's distributed structure made pressure points difficult to locate, because Johann had designed it that way on purpose, the same way he designed everything, assuming friction and building around it. He said he thought it would be fine. Unji asked how he could be sure. He was quiet for a moment. Outside, a torch welder on the upper hull of the nearest tender sent a bright point of light across the dark in a long, clean arc. Somewhere in the outer black, past the last relay node, past the last survey marker, Mireille's ship was moving toward coordinates that had no name yet. Same reason we were always fine, he said. He set his cup down on the windowsill. We're not afraid of being told no. The yards worked through the night. No one had voted on it. No resolution had been passed. No formal approval had come down from a chamber with high arches and amber light. They just built. They had always just built. That was the thing the council had never understood, not in 61 years of watching them from a corner chair. That humanity did not need permission to begin. It only needed room. And when the room was taken away, it turned out they could build that too.